situation. It's changed the world and its effect will be long lasting. Businesses should be keeping this in mind as they prepare for the next normal. Businesses have spent the last 9 months scrambling to adapt to the extraordinary circumstances, and hopefully 2021 will be the year of transition, where businesses and societies can look forward to reshaping the future. Against this background, the uncertainty created by the pandemic and Brexit aftermath, how do we approach international trade, mitigating the risks and providing confidence for SMEs seeking international trade opportunities? So I guess with that little start as to understand the theme of our panel meeting, let's start with the first question. A recent survey of SMEs in the UK conducted by Alibaba UK in October 2020 indicated that in the next 12 months, proportions of SMEs are intending to look at markets in North America, South Africa, South America, Middle East, and Asia. How might these companies approach these markets, and what guidance and assistance might be available? I wonder if I could start with you, Sam, to open up the discussion.
Yeah, thank you, Roger. I think you've outlined the current situation very well there. We've had a very stuttering start to 2021. I know a lot of SMEs were saying to me towards the end of last year, let's just get this year out of the way and then we'll start afresh, you know, Brexit deal, whatever you think of it, that's going to happen. But of course, the extra strain of COVID has just made it even more difficult. So I kind of think we don't really know yet where we're going. At the moment, we've got a double whammy affecting international trade, haven't we? We've got the first realisation from a lot of people that the Brexit deal has gaps, should we put it that way? And that's creating a certain amount of tension. But then on top of that, we've got the port situation, which is meaning a lot of things aren't coming in. And there's been a lot of negative publicity about that. And my concern is always, because I represent a lot of micros and small businesses who are always trying to encourage to export, that they read this stuff and they just think, do you know what? It's just too complicated. I'm just going to stick to the domestic market. So at the moment, I think it's very difficult to know where we're going. And I think when you talk about some of the places beyond Europe, and obviously we've got people like Marcus who understands Europe extremely well, they're going to be suffering from the same concerns, that the fear about this situation with the port call, how Britain is perceived. Are we considered now too difficult a country to deal with by some countries? And because they'll have their own press telling them their own version. So I'm a little bit nervous, shall we say, at the start of this year. I'm very confident going on, but at the start of the year, I feel a little bit nervous about the prospects for any trade, let alone international trade. So I think this is a bit of a false start. I don't think we'll really know where we are until maybe the early spring.
Is there some guidance we can give to people to encourage them, or do you think they're just sitting back under the current conditions in, Sam?
I think the one thing that we do have at the moment, and I found this with a lot of businesses generally throughout COVID last year, is for the first time for a long time, they've had a chance to think about what they want to do with their business. So maybe this is a time for us all to crank up, you know, advice about what trade can do and sort of demystify trading abroad. So I think we should keep doing that, even if we don't seem to get initially a fantastic response, because people are having time to think about where they want to go. And maybe that's why some of the people in that survey are saying they're going to look at a bit more exotic locations and perhaps just trading with Europe, which is what they've been doing in the past. So I think we just got to keep it going. All of us, we all have our own connections, we have our own networks, we all point people in the right directions. Just keep it going, even if we're not getting a lot back, because people are having time to think about where they want to go when we've got through the first stage of COVID.
Okay. Ken, would you like to sort of look from the other side of the Atlantic and tell us what your views are of how Britain is and the UK is viewed in the world at the moment, and our opportunities maybe for exporting in that direction?
Thank you, Roger, and welcome to all on the panel and to those participating on the meeting. As you know, we have a long-standing relationship with Great Britain, and as a result, we share common language, we share some common business culture, and we've enjoyed a good political relationship once we got through those troubles in the 1700s, and a trading relationship as well. We view the UK as a critical trading partner in a pure business sense, but an ally on the global stage as well. I would tell you that if you desire to do business in the U.S., in North America, but the U.S. specifically, you have to look at your, the issue of time value money. And I would suggest that anyone who is serious about trading in a significant way in the United States seek some guidance. And because it's a very large country, as you know, intuitively, but its landmass, its size means that we have a very sophisticated, long-standing and traditional system of how do we go to market, channels to market. And if you want to be successful on the US market, or Canada for that matter, because they're very similar, you must understand what we just simply call the rule of multipliers. You must understand how you multiply your efforts on the US market. And that is through distribution, it's through dealers, it's resellers, it's reps, it's agents, it's joint ventures, it's acquisitions, it's licensing. It's a lot of those things. In some channels, it's multiple pieces of those things. So I would say that just in summary, long history of trading with the UK, good relationships in trade and in the geopolitical sense, and the understanding, getting guidance, doing due diligence relative to the actual transitional, forget the trade piece of it, the actual nuts and bolts of import export, but the actual commercialization of your product on the US market is all about what we just simply call the law of multipliers in our practice.
So really, it's a lot of preparation. Make sure you're understanding the market and preparing for entry. Correct.
And that gets to the time value money equation, right? You can go it alone, and many do, or you can, and if you truly go it alone by putting your own personnel in place, there's a lot of advantages to that. One is control. That's the primary one, because you really don't get a cost benefit initially at all. It's at the end of the day more costly. But it's the issue of the guidance piece is critical, not just for market intelligence and competitive analysis and that sort of business, because truthfully, you can do that if you're prepared, if you have a good plan, and do not come to the US if you're not prepared in terms of doing your homework and in terms of staying power. You won't be successful in 1 year. You can have successes, but you must be in it for the long haul, 1, 3, 5 years. That's the range we must look at. But the piece that's critical is the feet on the street piece, the actual channel to market piece. And that's where most SMEs, whether in the UK or on the continent, struggle to understand is these sophisticated, long-standing channels to market.
Okay, thank you, Ken. Stephen, would you you're viewing in towards the UK. What's your views on the opportunities both for import and export to the UK?
So what I mean. Steve Simmons, sorry. Hello?
I assumed it meant you, Stephen.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, sorry. There's two. Yeah, Steve.
There's two Steves. Yeah.
Steve.
Sorry about that. Yeah, I think a lot of you will know that the UK is one of South Africa's biggest trade partners already, has been for many years. But I think one of the issues with that for SMEs is that if you look at 80% of our exports by value from South Africa, it's covered by 1% of businesses in South Africa. So what this brings along, of course, is an issue regarding smaller companies being able to deal in that sense. The other problem we have in South Africa as well is our policies and controls, and which tend to disadvantage smaller firms. And this is what's experienced all the time here. Which is why, if you look at South African SMEs, the manufacturing perspective, if they're looking outside of Africa, they're going to be looking at SADC, which is more across Africa. So you'll find historically most SMEs will deal within Africa itself, and they'll look for new markets in Africa, and a very small percentage, in fact. I looked at some stats, there's only about 9% of the SMEs actually look outside Africa, and some of them are looking at opening plants in Africa. What's also interesting, though, is that what some of them are doing, especially on the services side, they're dealing with companies in Malaysia and Singapore who are then on-selling back into the UK from those countries. So although they're not working directly with the UK, they're working through other companies in other countries who are then working with the UK. So in that way, they are getting some products up, but still it's like only about 2% of what could be managed. So from that point of view, I think from South Africa's perspective, there's a lot more that could be done if the SMEs understood, more about dealing with the UK, perhaps. I'm not sure about the Brexit implications because we don't really know here yet fully what that is from our perspective, but I think there are many opportunities that could be pursued.
Okay. What about UK companies looking into South Africa? Are there many barriers for that from that point of view?
I don't think so. I think what's happened more is that South African companies here opening offices in the UK, but that's more in the ICT sector. Certainly I've seen that a lot. A friend of mine opened a business in Utrecht in the Netherlands, who has a business here. And there's another company here that's got an office in the UK, and they've got offices here, but they're based here, but their offices are in the UK. So most of the ones I've seen from that perspective are more in the IT area. A lot of the companies that were here, like the old ICIs and other companies, Metalbox and all the traditional British companies that were around, they left the country. So from that point of view, I think there's a lot more that could be done with.
Okay. Chris Lau, would you like to sort of open up the view from Gloucestershire and what your view is on actually inward investment from overseas at the moment as well?
Yes, I think I echo a lot of the views previously. I think there's only a very small amount of companies who are exporting. Those who are exporting are doing extremely well. No doubt the Brexit ramifications are still coming through. Some of our companies have got their products sort of stuck at borders, not the right papers. There's still huge delays to get through. It's I wouldn't say the new business as usual, but we will get through it. I mean, businesses adapt very quickly. There will be additional costs. So certain products, we're already seeing sort of a substantial increase, 10 to 20% around the bureaucracy, around extra sort of tax levied. The biggest problem is still around the parts of origin. And that's where some of our companies are struggling. Because the global supply chain with globalization has just happened, and some of our companies don't even know where their products come from. They work through distributors and all that. So that's something we still need to navigate through. That's an additional complexity around inward investment. There are, I mean, still a few good trends. Asia Pacific's recovered remarkably well. China's done extremely well. So there are still markets that we're looking at. The free trade agreement with Japan particularly has spiked a lot of interest. DIT, we're working with DIT, a lot of local enterprise partnerships, looking at opportunities around there. Japan is a particularly interesting market around sort of robotics, cybersecurity, life sciences. So there's a lot happening around sort of on the horizon, but we are doing a lot more to support our companies, particularly around the Western Gateway, so which includes Gloucestershire, Swindon, Wiltshire, and West of England. We've taken on sort of additional sector specialists, so we now have a sector specialist for life sciences, a sector specialist for advanced manufacturing. We're doing a lot more sort of tailored events to help promote trade and help companies to get through. There's a lot happening. Roger.
Thank you. Sam, is that something that your members are seeing as an advantage to understand and think about exporting?
Yeah, no, I think Chris made some good points there, and he's right, by the way, about the origins. I expected probably a flood of calls about Brexit in the first part of the year. It's been more of a trickle. I've got to be brutally honest with you, but the origins question has been is absolutely right. People have got many components in something. You don't actually know exactly where to put it in. But yeah, I think I agree with Chris, really. I mean, people are maybe looking a bit further afield than perhaps traditional markets. But I do come back to what I said at the start. I think there's still a little bit of nervousness about the whole trade. Bear in mind, a lot of businesses might have all their staff furloughed, so aren't trading anyway yet. So I don't think we're going to get the full picture about the state of international trade, the state of Brexit dealings for a little while yet. But the early indications were very quiet, but the noise is starting to go up a little bit now. It's starting to come back on the radar. I think as, dare I say it, looking at the news cycle, as the COVID story gets smaller, the trade, international trade, Brexit story will get bigger, because it was getting that way before, wasn't it? And I must confess, I don't fully understand, maybe there's so many people here who know so much about these things, what the issue with the ports is. What is the thing that's holding things up at ports at the moment? Could anybody summarise that for me? Because that is definitely a barrier at the moment.
Yeah.
Might be able
Marcus,
to, sorry.
You want to come in there?
Yeah, thanks a lot, Roger. I was just about to say something. Yeah, what we see at the moment is stuff being stuck at the way out, because there's a period of grace for the way in. So anything that comes into the UK is not a problem. This is why you don't have any food shortages. It's only the odd supermarkets might be empty of fresh produce shelves, because people want to, from the continent, also align to what the new deal means for them. But I think in general, it's deceiving to think the UK will strike all these new trade deals now, because these trade deals are simply, in most cases, deals that the UK already had through EU membership, and they're simply being rolled over. So what they are doing now is they're trying to regain the deals they had. So basically, the opportunities of trading with other parts of the world aren't greater. They're currently smaller, and they try to achieve what was there before Brexit, basically.
Okay, but we'll come back to the Brexit in the next question, I'm sure, in some detail. Does that help, Sam?
Oh yeah, sorry, yes, I was on mute. Yes, it does. Thank you, Mark.
Just coming back to Sam, to your members, is finance a major problem in their consideration as to how they approach international trade? Do they know where to go and look for funds and how they're going to fund their business?
I think by and large there is a growing awareness. I think there is quite a lot of support systems. There's obviously private companies like Marcus and what he does and others, but I always get these letters the wrong way around. It's like DTI, DIT, and whatever are very good and are very strong, and they offer lots of events, and we sort of help to market them. And I think the information's there, but finance is an issue at the moment, full stop. I think finance is an issue whether you're dealing with Birmingham, Berlin or Barbados. So I don't think that's going to go away. I think one of the things that we might be wary of is now that we've got the Brexit deal as such, and if there may be a lot more looking inwards, people might start getting a bit more inward looking, and that is exactly what we don't want to happen, because there's a big wide world out there we can trade with. But one thing I did pick up on what Mark was saying about shortages. The one part of Britain which is struggling, and I know this because I had a meeting with all my colleagues from the FSB across the country, Northern Ireland is struggling. Northern Ireland, the lady who does my job for Northern Ireland was saying that, there are shelves empty. There are businesses in Britain, let alone anywhere else in the world, that aren't trading with Northern Ireland at the moment. And I think that is an issue that Northern Ireland was very big political football, but everyone sort of sidelined it. But the reality of that is that's going to be difficult. And the problem for us, again, with this whole subject, is if people think, I can't even trade with Northern Ireland, what chance have I got of trading with North America or South America? We don't want to get a negative feeling about trading abroad. And at the moment, there are a lot of negatives out there. We've got to be honest with that.
Oh, thanks for that. Richard, you're obviously in the financing field. What are you finding with SMEs? Are funds available for them to support their considerations of entering the export market?
Well, yeah, I think for the right SME, there's the appetite with the right lenders, but it is all about, making sure you're in the right state to be able to borrow money. I think, we're well into the pandemic now. What is it, 10 months, 11 months, and another 6 months probably at least to run before we're anywhere near normal. So lenders are now expecting people to actually have adapted to the current normal, because no point in waiting for the the new normal. This is normal now. And but if you're running a profitable, if you've adapted and you're still trading, and providing you can show that you're making money, then I definitely have lenders lined up to help people trade internationally, and particularly for those that have been looking to trade outside the EU. I mean, I know we're talking a lot about the EU and Brexit, but actually I don't think trade outside of the EU has changed at all since the 1st of January. It's still the same, more or less the same rules. It was always, so those deals, as somebody has already pointed out, are the same now as they were before the end of the year. So, but yeah, no. Unfortunately, although the COVID loans are called COVID business interruption loans, and people have sort of got those in mind as helping them tide them over, that's not the case. I mean, they're really there for businesses that are still trading, and that's just a fact of life. No bank can give money to anybody who's actually making a loss now. It's just that's just the way of the world.
Thinking of point of origin, Steve Bates this time on the procurement side, what are you finding with any difficulties from the point of view of developing international trade overseas?
I think what will start happening is, and we'll probably talk about it a bit later on when we get involved in the supply chain discussion, that customers are finding that their supply chains are really stretched, okay, and they're dependent on maybe single suppliers for their services and their products, and are finding that is now a bit of a risk, and are looking for alternative sources of supply, which I think does introduce an opportunity for small businesses, large businesses to, become on the radar of those clients and, open up alternative sources. So I think very much so. And Ken nailed it earlier on when he said you've got to do your homework when you get into these international markets. Absolutely. You've got to know what you're entering into. There's obviously a lot of expertise on this panel that can give advice to businesses about trading internationally. Sam mentioned the Department for International Trade, which is also they've got a very good website that does like a country by country analysis, but it's a little bit general, but it gives you a flavour of where the issues might be before you consider trading in that country. And as a result of that, you may need to take specialist advice, when it comes to things like tax laws. Bring on board an international tax expert who can tell you all about the delights of things like sales tax and double taxation rules, and withholding taxes might be critical to how you do business in another territory.
Okay, well, thanks. It was mentioned point of origin. Do you see difficulties occurring in that at all, or from the point of view of the supply base?
I think that might result in changes to how supply chains work in the future. I know, for example, say the fashion industry in the UK, which has depended quite a lot on supplies from India and Bangladesh. They're already paying tariffs on those supplies, and then when they're trying to export those finished garments into the EU, for example, they're then having to pay extra tariffs to get access to those markets. So there's a double tariff situation happening there, and that I think will result in changes to the way that those supply chains work in the future. And I know also, looking away from the sort of garment industry to one that's a business I've been talking to recently that supplies tools, power tools, operates in the EU, has operations in the UK mainly, but they buy a lot of their product from overseas outside the EU, and they are also hit with the rules of origin arrangements, and they're having to reconsider how they do their supply chain. And some of it may miss out the UK altogether avoid that hit.
So quite a significant point that was raised then on point of origin.
Yeah.
Roger, may I come in there? Just on origin.
By all means.
Apologise for breaking in. I've probably been receiving between 10 and 15 calls a day at the present time, and it's going up. The origin is really suffering because there seems to be misinformation out there from the point of view that there isn't anybody who's actually defining exactly what the rules of origin are. It basically, if it's transforming a product in the UK, it meets the rules of origin. The whole thing about Steve said about Bangladesh goods. I've got one customer who's got a trailer and stuck in France for 10 days now, since basically the beginning of the year, because he thought that he would be able to transfer his goods, GSP goods from Bangladesh, into and move the goods from the UK, from bonded warehouse into France, using his GSP from Bangladesh. And now he's got a lorry load of fashion wear stuck in France. He has got Siren, VAT registration in France, but no one's actually supporting me in what is his registration in France? Who is he selling to? And can he transfer his GSP from one country to another if it doesn't actually hit the UK because it's gone into a bond? And all these questions have not been answered in the marketplace. And it really is, and more and more customers are coming to me. I've got one guy bringing in wheels from Poland who has Chinese tires he puts on them and then resells them back to the EU. What are they? Because no, it is a real situation. He's now having to pay double duty on the movement of those goods now. And there's no clarity whatsoever of where these companies can go to. I'm giving partial advice, and I'm learning more and more about preference. And the deeper it goes, it's transformation, and it's down to if there is any form of transformation, it'll probably change. Other than that, there's real worry out there. One customer today, she says, I'm giving up my business on upholstery or getting goods made in Europe. She says, I'm going to lose my business. £2 million business goes because she's moving fabric around Europe into different manufacturers who make specific furniture. And she's bringing them back into the UK and selling them in the UK market. She said, my business probably for next month is going to go unless you can help me. And I'm looking at doing IPR and OP for her. She's gone back to suppliers in Europe to say, please apply for IP so we can do the processing for you on the fabrics being supplied from the UK. And they said, no, we're fine working in the UK, in Europe. We don't want to work with you if we're going to have to set up IP. It's really frustrating out there.
Perhaps we can come back to that when we have Marcus on talking about Brexit in more detail. Marcus, have you got any comments on that before we go on?
Yes, I can. Regarding to what Steve said, basically having to pay extra tariffs if your goods originate to a certain percentage at least from outside the UK or outside the EU. And this will change the supply chains. We started offering such a service or such a supply chain in 2017, thinking we will come to the point where people will need supply chains that are basically located in the EU to avoid importing stuff to into the UK and then re-exporting it into the EU, like the example that Humphrey has given also. And so basically, and that goes along with UK businesses basically having to decide what do they do in the future. It'll be a very binary decision that they have to make. They need to look at their business and have to decide, is it worthwhile under the current situation with this deal that turns out for many people to be a can of worms, rather than the great deal that's tariff-free, whether it's still a business or not, whether it's going to make money. And if it doesn't make money, look at other solutions. But I'll probably come back to that later. But basically, that is a big problem. So tariff-free isn't tariff-free, and everything is really complicated. I'm trying to get an overview on what everything is now, and I'm struggling myself.
I think many people are. Thanks. We'll come back to that again, I'm sure, Marcus, in our next question. Sandra, if I might just ask you your views on the opportunities that you see, sort of looking on a wider basis with your cities experience worldwide for expanding exports out of the UK.
Yeah, thank you so much, Roger. And it's so, I so appreciate the difficulties and the challenges with Brexit, although I know so little about it, frankly. So I just wanted to offer some ideas. My company, Personal Cities, is really focused on supporting SMEs, small and medium enterprises around the world. And I wanted to give some actual recommendations without speaking about what's going on with Brexit and the EU per se. I think that there's an opportunity to really work with cities. Of course, there's country-to-country transaction, but cities actually, I think there's never been a more direct effect in terms of getting deals done. And I also would say that a lot of the city business can be done through services rather than manufacturing goods or products. But for example, there are certain cities where I think they're very interested in working internationally and with every, companies in the UK that have to do with, for example, finances, financial banking, finances that have to do with transactions. There are cities that are famous for that. Of course, I mean, everyone knows New York, certainly San Francisco, Charlotte, North Carolina. These cities are looking for partnerships and new collaborations. We're all struggling in that regard. If you look at transport, not just passenger, but cargo transport, Anchorage, Alaska, Atlanta, Georgia, these cities are very interested in new coalitions. If you look at technology, artificial intelligence, robotics, autonomous vehicles, Detroit, San Francisco again, many cities around the US are very interested in those technologies and I think would welcome partnerships. The trick is to figure out, where the connection is, where the networking. And I think, as Sam said it in the very beginning, the value of networking, to just keep doing these kinds of meetings so that we can figure out where the city opportunities are. And I think there are a lot of city leaders that are looking for that kind of new collaboration, new coalition. Every single city that I work with in the US and some in Europe are struggling to find ways to support small and medium enterprises. So I think this is maybe a good launch point for getting new business done internationally.
So when you say they're looking to support SMEs, what sort of support are they offering in terms of achieving those sort of ends?
Yeah, in the United States, as all of you know, we're about to have a new president, and I think he is very interested in offering a lot more funding to state and local operations. So the money is there in the U.S., and I think once these cities get this funding, they will distribute it to small and medium enterprises within the city. I guess the statistic I've seen most recently is that there's 20% a diminishment of small and medium enterprises. All of you are talking about companies that just aren't going to make it. But if it's 20%, that means 80% of businesses may still succeed if in fact there's new partnerships and new funding. So that's where I think the opportunity is.
Okay, great, thank you. Right, let's just move on to the Brexit era. Again, a survey carried out recently showed that 59% of the SMEs are looking for the EU to develop their business. Whether that's going to change with the understanding of what's going on, of course, is another issue. With reduced access to Europe for British companies in various sectors, in particular in the service sector, financial services, for example, what should these SMEs consider in their approach to the market? I guess, Marcus, this is an interesting opening for you.
All right, thanks, Roger. Yeah, financial services. Unfortunately, the New Deal doesn't govern anything regarding services. So that means if you offer financial services from the UK, you now have to be in the EU. You need an EU presence, and there's a widespread confusion as to what an EU presence is, and it's basically not just a virtual office that you rent in Frankfurt or something. It is the virtual office, so a place of business, plus incorporation. So you need to incorporate a company, a legal entity in the EU in order to offer your services. And as far as on the whole, the deal is a lot less what many people expected. So in terms of looking at a glass that's half full or half empty, what I had expected from the deal is more. People got more than I thought. So to me, it's something like 3/4 full. To many other people, it's almost empty, because I think they believed what was promised to them and now found, well, hold on, we probably cannot eat our cake and keep it at the same time. So in general, it is still worthwhile trading with the EU because the hurdles are still lower than trading with the rest of the world. However, it's become a lot more difficult than it was before.
Come back to you in a minute, Mike.
Yeah.
Sam, you commented on some of your members' difficulties. Do you want to expand a bit more on the difficulties dealing on the Brexit front?
Yeah, funny enough, Marcus said about you can't have your cake and eat it, which is a famous English phrase I've never quite understood. I mean, what's the point of having a cake? But one of the other famous English phrases is the devil is in the detail. And I think when the Brexit deal was announced, I sensed, not just amongst the businesses, but amongst family and friends, a sort of collective sigh of relief, really. That, you know, something was happening. Now we can concentrate on other things. But I think Sean's just put a note up, which is probably the reality. I think as businesses have actually gone into the reality of what it means, they're finding it a little bit trickier than they thought. And I was listening to what Marcus was saying about, you know, having an office in Frankfurt, and he's done a very good piece for the FSB about data representatives. And I'm already thinking, if I was thinking of trading abroad, I might be thinking twice. And so I think we're going to need all the people on this call and others to sort of encourage people, because I think those that have got to trade, you know, will trade. But as Humphrey's discovering, a lot of them are thinking this is very, very difficult, and this is going to get more and more difficult. So we're just getting a bit of it so far. Interesting enough, when I did this call with all my colleagues around the country, we all asked what sort of calls are getting about Brexit. The most were for people on the south coast, I think, that were dealing with, probably had more dealings with, but various people were starting to say, well, I had my first call about it last week and they were saying this. I had something from a company in Cirencester last week about origins again. And the problem is that there's a feeling that we don't quite know where to go for that kind of level of detail. We all know the headlines and stuff, but when it comes to the actual detail, if Marcus doesn't understand it all, I've got no chance. And I think that's the problem, that how many people fully understand the implications? And I think the longer this goes on, and we're only what, 18 days into it, so we've not really scratched the surface. I think, you know, it's going to rise and rise. So I think those of you that are experts in the field are probably going to be very, very busy. But I'm nervous. That's as far as I'll say about the reaction at the moment.
Okay. Steve, any sort of comments from you on that at all?
Which Steve, Roger?
Steve. Steve.
As opposed to Stephen. Yeah, I think we're going to be going through this initial phase encountering teething problems, certainly. So we all know that the Scottish shellfish exporters are struggling because they've got perishable goods. There's all this paperwork that now needs to be completed, and it's taking a lot longer to get their product to the end client. And by then, you know, maybe it's no good to the end client. So I know they sort of drove up a load of lorries outside 10 Downing Street yesterday. And then I read in the papers at the weekend that a fashion client based in Belgium had taken delivery of some fashion items from a UK supplier. The order size, I think, was £800, but because the paperwork hadn't been completed correctly, it still got there, by the way, they were levied with a £400 charge by local customs. So that sort of increased the price by 50%. Now, all that stuff, I think, is probably temporary, and we'll get over it. The new paperwork will become increasingly understood, and people will work their way around it. But there is obviously a new normal coming, and there is documentation to complete, which will have to be completed. That will inevitably delay. It won't be as smooth as it was. The government's recognised that because they've now built a 7,000 lorry car park in Kent. So that's not a response to a short-term situation. That's expected to be a long-term thing. And I think the greatest complexity around these, around the trade agreement for goods is going to be just the haulage between the UK and the EU, Dover, Calais, and other crossing points. Those businesses that maybe trade online, right, and have online platforms, may need to operate, find warehousing in the EU. And warehousing is very, very popular at the moment. Lots of businesses are looking for warehousing to help with their supply chains.
Are you seeing that situation, Marcus? That's a route to market that people are now considering?
Yeah, as I said, these services I mentioned that we started in 2017 are warehousing, e-commerce fulfillment, then the data representative that Sam mentioned, and everything you would need as a UK business to carry on trading with the EU, or actually to start trading with the EU. So and in terms of devils in the detail, we take people by the hand and guide them through it so they can concentrate on selling, and their service providers can concentrate on getting the stuff across the border. As far as the teething problems that Steve just mentioned is concerned, yes, a certain amount of it will be these will be initial things that will be rooted out in the future, and some processes will be streamlined. However, I think the majority of the problems are by design. Yeah. So the UK is simply not part of the single market and the customs union anymore, and that's reflected by many of the calls I received. They say, well, why can't I do this? Why do I need to establish a full entity in the EU? Can't I just use my UK business and say I have a branch office there? No, you can't, because these are now two different markets. And over the last decades, people got so used to it being in a single market that it's very hard for them to imagine what it's like to be in two separate markets. So to have the situation we have now. Yeah. So I think what will happen will unravel in the course of this year and the years to come, because you have many periods of grace, some of them up to 12 months. So we have basically in parts still a transition period in certain aspects, certain respects.
Okay. I've got Guy Timpson who wants to make a point. Guy, do you want to make your point?
Yeah, Marcus just mentioned transition. I think one of the biggest issues with Brexit here is that because everything was so last minute to do with the finalisation of the agreement, what would normally have been a reasonable transition period is now falling into an implementation period. And whether it was by design or whether it was just brinksmanship by both parties in order to get the best deal for both sides, I think that's where a lot of these companies are really struggling, because there is no legislation on either side that's been bedded in to help with the transition, because everything is now being implemented. And I think for an awful lot of companies that are having to implement and transition whilst carrying on business, whereas they normally would have had a bit of time where they can set aside certain times, even just during the week, to think, right, how are we going to do that? How are we going to do this? And gradually get a plan together. They're now having to do everything literally thinking on their feet. And it's not fair. And there are going to be a lot of issues with it. But again, it's like Marcus said, You know, there are certain grace periods, but with some, there just aren't any, and there's a lot of companies struggling with it.
Thank you, Guy.
I agree, yeah.
Yeah, it's very much so. Sandra, you're looking at Brexit from the other side of the water. What's the views of in the States about how you might want to deal with this?
Well, thank you, Roger. It gets back to, I think, finding new collaborations, new coalitions. I would invite everyone in the UK to sort of think about, you know, what is the business you are interested in exporting, and who could you partner with in a new way that maybe wasn't a partner before. Again, I speak from so much ignorance about the intricacies and the challenges that's going on with Brexit, but I can tell you that there is one of my recommendations for what we should do going forward, especially to support small and medium enterprises, is to really focus on trust building. Can we work together in new ways? I mean, they say that trust is the glue of society and the grease of economic development. I love that phrase, and I think you know, what can we do to connect with each other and find, again, mutual collaborations that may not have existed pre-Brexit. So I think there's opportunity in the services industry, as I say, more than in manufacturing and product transactions, but it's out there. So you know, if everyone on this call and if everyone listening to this recording was interested in doing some kind of a service business with the city in the United States, I'd be happy to make that introduction. And I think that's where, you know, you've got to connect those dots in some new ways that we might not have done pre-COVID. And one more point, I think 2021 is not going to be much different from 2020 in terms of how we can travel and connect services, but especially, you know, minus language barriers, especially US, UK. I mean, it's out there, and I think cities are hungry for it. So hopefully that can move us forward.
Thank you, Sandra. Just coming back to the Brexit situation, Chris Lau, what's the views from your point of view of the LEP as to how this is affecting and how we can help SMEs in the region?
I think Sam, I think a lot of people made a very good point. It's still a moving feast at the moment. The devil is certainly in the detail. So until we're entirely sure what the rules are, I think that there's only a limited amount we can do. I mean, I think DIT is doing a fantastic job putting a lot more information out, a lot more seminars. It would be great to push those messages out. And I think it's these events which are very useful. I mean, talking to each other, sharing information, and I think it will play a much bigger role going forward, especially if we're looking at markets outside of the EU. There's a brave new world outside, and I think a lot of companies aren't aware of it, and it's just the COVID, Brexit just makes them sort of look internally, and if they're willing to look beyond that, there's so much opportunities outside that.
Okay, what sort of opportunities do you feel that are available then?
I think people are often overlooking, well, China because of IP issues. I mean, China is a massive market on its own, lots of consumer powers. E-commerce, for example, they're progressing extremely advanced. I think the whole model of using certain platforms, whether it's WeChat or JD, I mean, one-stop shop doing multiple things, from marketing, comms, banking, finance. There's, to a certain extent, some of those models are much more advanced than we do in the Western world. There are obviously some sensitivities around China, as always, but you really need to get to grips with with the local dynamics. Each market's very different. So it's very difficult to put a blanket sort of advice on how to do it. You need that local understanding, local expertise to crack it. But there are many outside. For example, I mean, for Gloucestershire, we're starting to do a lot more with Australia. Building on what Sandra said, I mean, we're building city relationships with between Bathurst and Cirencester. Those historical links work very well. There's a lot of synergy with that sort of rural, suburban sort of contacts about the quality of goods and all that. And those are doing very well. So there's a lot more we're hoping to achieve.
Okay, thanks. If we come back to you, Marcus, on the question of, it's a big question, I guess, in terms of not knowing exactly where we are on the Brexit path at the moment. What might we be able to do to support SMEs in the UK to give them some direction?
I think from the government side, the SMEs they need grants. Definitely. They need grants in order to, first of all, go out, inform themselves what they should do, to get the legal advice, to get the contracts in place, to be able to connect up with their new European supply chains if they need any. So many of the SMEs that contact us are simply clueless, and I'm talking 95%. Yeah. There's been rather misinformation campaign than an information campaign. If I come back to the EU data rep that businesses will need, I think there's a period of grace for 4 months, so needed from April. Try and look this up on the HMRC side. You will find it's dealt with rather than like a footnote. However, the even minor offences are penalised with up to 10 million euros. So, I mean, a small business breaching GDPR once could have serious implications on depending on what type of breach. And the HMRC informs people in a very small paragraph that you might need such a representative if you offer goods in the EU. So so information campaign, grants for small businesses, and these businesses need to know where to go for advice and for further help. As I said, most of these businesses now basically have to face the decision whether they should continue their EU trade or not. And in many cases, not continuing the EU trade, they don't have a viable business anymore because it's not enough.
Well, especially when you're looking at over 50% of the current and potential SMEs looking to do business with the EU.
Yeah.
On the basis there's a lack of understanding as to what is actually now required. Sam, how might we promote this at a local or even a government level to try and get some better understanding? Is that something that we could suggest?
Well, I think it's very necessary. I think what Marcus has said is spot on. And if people are thinking it's just going to be too hard, too expensive, too risky to trade abroad, they may not continue doing so. And as I say, at the moment, that is concentrating on Europe, but I do think it would have implications for other parts of the world as well, because I think it would start to lose confidence. And I agree with Marcus, you know, we do need financial support for businesses to go abroad. But do you know what? I spend my life asking the government for grants for small businesses, but I suspect they'll listen more for internal. They want to boost their own home market rather than necessarily abroad. So it's going to be an even trickier thing. So I noticed in the next section that it was about, you know, top tips about what we can do. And I just think we've all got a responsibility, if we can, to try and talk it up, because the forces of negativity are pretty strong out there. And they're growing all the time. And I think, you know, if a business is faced with the thought of all this, what they see it as red tape or all these difficulties trading abroad, you know what, I'm going to close that side of my business down and just trade internally. And for some of them, you know, abroad is where they're really going to make their money, because there's still something to be said for the Union Jack on a product. We know that. And it still means something in a global sense. But people who cut down that side of the market might not have a business either. So they're faced with this situation. If I don't trade abroad, I might not have a business. If I, but if I just carry on doing internally, I may not have a business either. So it's difficult. It really is difficult. And I think we are early days. And I think Guy made a very good point that, to go straight from the announcement of a deal to implementation, everything else has a transition period. Everything. This isn't. We were on December the 31st, we were dealing with A. January the 1st, we were dealing with B. And nobody understood what B meant. So I think we maybe need to be a bit patient. Maybe this isn't where it's going to be in 6 months' time. So, maybe it isn't as doom and gloom as it now appears. But at the moment, it's a tricky start.
Sam, one of the problems is a lot of people didn't know what A meant either. So if they didn't know what A meant, then they weren't going to be able to transition between A and B anyway. There was an awful lot of vagaries to do with various different industries and their potential EU arrangements that kept on fluctuating and changing, with the governments this end, with Strasbourg, the other end. So how are you ever going to transition something that's totally liquid?
Yeah, I think the problem was, it was the whole case with Brexit. It was so much about politics and not about business. It was all about where you stood politically, about Brexit. Business became a sideline, and it became an irritant to some people. I think they just wanted to talk about the politics, and now we're all struggling. So
let's talk about a sort of checklist for SMEs that might help them. I mean, the first one really is seeing if we can talk presumably with the likes of DIT through to the government as to providing much more visibility as to what the Brexit deal is all about. Is that right?
It probably is, but whether you'll get it from them or not, I think a lot of people that aren't involved in international trade have moved on from Brexit now. They're more interested in obviously COVID. They're more interested in what's happening in Sandra's country. Their focus is gone. And if you try and raise the subject of Brexit now with somebody who doesn't trade internationally, you can almost see their shoulders slump. It's fallen down the agenda, really. So it's up for those who are interested to fight the corner. But I'm not 100% convinced we're going to get the support from government that we need. So business may need to lead this.
Roger, from a South African perspective, on what Sam was saying, I fully agree with him, because we just had a new agreement put in place with the UK earlier this month, free trade pact. New free trade pact. So we can have free trade between South Africa and Mozambique and other African countries with the UK. But to be honest with you, we don't know anything about it at all. People have been asking me, there's been lots of WhatsApps and all sorts of emails going around. This is great, but what does it mean for us? So I don't know if from a UK perspective or whatever information you have on that could be useful here, but it's certainly something you should be able to check this for us to look at, because we already have wine exports, fruit juices, all those sort of things with supermarkets in the UK, and I'm sure we'll continue under that agreement. So I think for the smaller businesses, with our economies being complementary, there's a lot of opportunities for the smaller companies, but I guess they need to fit into this and understand this new agreement. Same way as everyone else around the world's got the same problem. We have a similar problem here.
A similar problem in understanding the agreement, you mean?
Yes, absolutely, yeah. Mm.
So, Marcus, how might we project this better? Any thoughts on that?
I think first of all, we need time to understand the deal first of all, so I think most of this year will be spent doing that, understanding what the new rules are, and then I think when people look for solutions, the EU is not just one monolithic market, but it does consist of 27 member states. So if you find that if you relocate to or basically you replicate your UK business in another country with a legal entity, choose that solution, then you do well by looking which country are you going to. Some countries, especially in Eastern Europe, offer really, really good tax rates, but is this practical? Can you work with these people where only a small amount of the population actually does speak English? Yeah, there are certain aspects to look at, yeah. And again, people need to inform themselves properly what route they can go. And then need to make the right connections, which is virtually impossible if you haven't got connections into these countries. You basically have to start in the UK and see who offers a bridge into the EU. But I would say it is possible. SMEs shouldn't. I think it is very important to support that. To support what Sam said, and basically all on this panel, is that businesses should not be reluctant to export in the future, because exporting means a security for businesses as well. You all know that exporting businesses are far less likely to go bankrupt than businesses who concentrate on the interior market. So I can only promote exporting, and people should do more of it, but they need to inform themselves, again, devil's in the detail, how to do it and where to do it. They need good advice.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Hey, Roger, could I just add a few tips on your checklist?
Yes, please, yes.
I think, and again, from the U.S. perspective, I think there's a real interest in doing business with the UK, especially people are sort of like not understanding the problems and challenges you're dealing with that Sam and Marcus and everyone's mentioned how difficult this is and that it's in transition at some level. But in the meantime, there's a convergence of crises. It's all over the world, from social and racial injustice to COVID to climate change. I mean, I think there's opportunities based on these crises we're all facing, Brexit being another one of them. But I would recommend that we collaboratively look for, where can rents be deferred? Where can there be new money found? If there's a repository of cities that are interested in doing business with other cities. When I look at the cities that are doing innovation in the UK, Bristol, Manchester, Gloucestershire, certainly Southampton, Brighton. I mean, there's so many cities that people are interested in doing, in working together. And I think that is out there. I'll just give you two other examples. One is that Reno, Nevada. I think one of the things that COVID has really destroyed, and I'm sure you know this in the UK, is tourism. So where are the tourism synergies, if you will? Reno, Nevada is, if you know it, it's very famous for its casinos, sort of a smaller version of Las Vegas. But the mayor there is very interested in collaboration. So are there cities such as Gloucestershire where there's a collaboration? We could do some joint promotion, joint communication. I've forgotten who said this idea. I think it was Guy, about the need for communicating, and whether that gives you the right results or not. I guess it is about being patient. One other idea that is really happening in the U.S. a lot, and I don't know if it works in the UK, but there's a fund called the Barstool Fund. The UK folks should like this, because it is it's a guy actually based in Baltimore, Maryland, who started a fund to support restaurants. And I was at a restaurant last night for my birthday, and I found out that Martin's Tavern has gotten funding from the Barstool Fund to help see it through the next 6-9 months, whatever it's going to take. So maybe there are more philanthropic organizations to provide funding. It's just another idea. I know the city of Oakland, California has really teamed up with philanthropists to get money. I mean, the money's there. Let's figure out how we can help cities and SMEs within them. I could go on, but I'll stop. Thank you, Roger.
Thank you. Has anybody got any other tips that we should consider? And maybe we have a more discussion in detail, Sam, about how we can move this forward for SMEs.
Yeah, I mean, I think if ever I talk to anybody who's thinking about exporting, and and way back, it sounds way back now because it was a different world. In 2019, the FSB did a report about exporting, a national report, which shows that as many people who are exporting now would export if they felt they had more support. So the interest was there. So we know that the interest is there. And I think the key thing I would always say, and I think it very much echoes what Sandra said earlier, really, and Marcus and others as well, is don't even try and do it alone. You know, we shouldn't magnify how difficult it is to export, but equally we shouldn't minimize it. And I think it's about telling people to do as much research as they can, but also to remember. I mean, I used to have meetings with, it used to be the Department of Trade Minister, Liam Fox, in that position. And he travelled all around the world talking to businesses. And he said that there is still a willingness to support British industry. And I said it earlier, that Union Jack, he says, the first bit of advice he gives to every business is put a Union Jack on your product. That still means something in certain parts of the world. And I think it's simple advice like that, that telling people that, you know, despite all the hassles, people do want to do business with the UK. But then so much, I picked up so much from this morning, just don't even dream of doing it alone, because you could end up losing money, losing faith, and also losing interest very quickly because you're going to struggle. So the more support you can give people, the better.
Absolutely. I mean, doing your homework and being prepared first of all, and you're saying find partners within the country or find somebody who knows how to deal in that particular territory. Those are crucial.
Yeah, and sector as well. Sector as well, I think, is important because in my experience, nothing helps a business more than to hear a sort of case study of somebody like them who does something similar. So if you're selling sort of pottery or something abroad, to talk to another potter that's done it is gold dust. So yeah. I would always urge people to put people in touch with people, and not unrealistic. There's no point telling an SME to go and talk to the biggest pottery, the Staffordshire Pottery, for example, who are the biggest in the country. No, somebody like them that has done it, that has been through because you might think, well, they're competitive. Well, they're not. If they're trading with the US is big enough to be able to cope with two SME potters. So that's just, you know, so find people that on your sector. I think that's important as well.
And the other thing, of course, is to understand the culture, I guess. There are cultural differences. That's important as well.
Well, I've just got 2 points, if we can bring them up. I agree what he's saying, and I think one of the points I raised for myself is you should have a strong position at the buyer's end. You know, the relationship is key. So, you know, when you're dealing with people at that level, make sure you're dealing with them and you've got a strong position, you know one another, you understand one another, and you know how you're going to work together going forward. And have the expertise yourself for those markets. Know those markets already, so that when you're talking to one another, they can see you're talking from a position of some strength, as opposed to knowing nothing. And then the other thing, if it's products, have a product that's already got guaranteed access to it because you've already established it already in your country. It's already got a name, it's already got a brand. So have that brand available so when you try to look at the other markets to expand and bring those things across properly. Those are 2 things I was bringing up from myself. Thank you.
And you've got a point.
Yeah, sorry. I would just say that history has got lots of examples of quite big organisations based in the UK trying to do business in other territories, and they failed, right? And they're businesses that have got loads of access to expertise, and, you know, no doubt they structured their businesses overseas, taking into account tax laws and intellectual property protection and so on. But I think at the end of the day, where they failed was around the cultural differences and the marketing and the behavior of the clients in those territories. So you do, like we keep saying, we do need to do your homework, and it's not just that sort of specialist finance and tax and all the rest of it. It's all the sort of marketing and
it's the soft side as well. It's the soft side as well.
Yeah,
that's most important.
Yeah.
Ken, you had a point to make as well. Thanks, Steve.
Thank you.
Thanks indeed, Roger. You know, what we're really talking about at the end of the day is trade barriers, right? Whether it's tariffs in general or Brexit in particular, it's trade barrier. And we deal with trade barriers all the time. And In our practice, we look at it as we look at apparent trade barriers, agency, tariff, and duties, whatever, right? Non-parent, and these are often hidden trade barriers. But I think and we've discussed, exporting companies are more successful. They have a greater worldview. They mitigate their risk across markets and geographies. But the number one trade barrier for SMEs to do business on the American market is fear, plain and simple. And it's justified. It's absolutely justified. If you come here without doing your homework, you will have your nose bloodied and you will run home and you will hate trading with Americans and you will hate the US market. So fear is the number one issue. At the end of the day, the psychological issue of emotion of fear is what prevents most SMEs from coming on to the US market. And it's interesting because we deal with large SMEs in Germany and in Holland in particular. And oftentimes they will pick the United States as their last export market. They'll go to Canada even first because they think it's easier, it's safer. The fact of the matter is the same effort will be expended just about in any market that's substantial, geographic market. So how do you mitigate fear? Knowledge, right? You learn the market, and that can be organically within your own organization, or it can be external through other parties. So I would say that overcoming that fear through information, through knowledge, is the very first step. And that's what we find in our practice.
Thank you, Ken. Thanks for that. We're running a bit short of time, so let's just move on to the supply chain side. Obviously, in international trade, the supply chains are critical. The supply chains need rebalancing and a shift. It was just in time. Now, what is it? Just in time plus? Who knows? Perhaps, Steve, you'd like to give us some thoughts on how the supply chains might be changing following the situation we have and how we can de-risk them and minimize the costs in supporting the SMEs.
Yeah, so I think we've had maybe 30 years, maybe more, of globalization of supply chains as businesses have found the sort of lowest cost solutions to their suppliers. Now, I think those supply chains were already under a bit of strain before COVID came along. The pandemic has brought that into sharp relief. But there were other factors at play. For example, we know that there have been trade tensions around the world, US to China, US, EU, UK, China, you know, with the 5G debate. So there are tensions out there. There's political uncertainty as well around the world, which then tends to result in lack of clarity around global tariffs. And not forgetting climate change. It's been put on the back burner for this year because of the pandemic, but it will come back. 2021, I think, will be a big year for climate change discussions. And that will be a big public opinion area. And I mentioned globalization, focus on the cost base. Well, climate change will kind of focus on social and environmental factors. And the cost base will be sort of more in balance with the other two. And the impact, I think, of those factors means that a number of things will happen. One is, and I mentioned it earlier on, businesses with long supply chains and maybe dependent on maybe one supplier will be looking for alternatives, which is a good opportunity for small businesses to put their hands up and try and grab some of that business. Warehousing is become really big real estate at the moment because in the UK, businesses that do a lot of importing from the EU and that sort of disruption that's happening there will want to have the comfort and confidence that they've got access to stocks that they can supply their own clients with in the UK and are looking to invest in more warehousing capacity. And also the result of Brexit, if they've got customers already in the EU, they're looking at warehouses in the EU. So I think warehousing has become a big issue now, very much never really been thought a bit of a dull, boring subject in the past, but now very, very popular. I think businesses will also optimize their logistics operations. So I read the other day that the cost of sea freight has almost doubled in the last few months, and businesses are thinking about other ways. So it might be a long supply chain, but if they use other, like air transport, it can be a quicker way of getting the goods from A to B. I read with interest, I don't know if you saw it, Amazon have actually bought 11 planes in the last few weeks because they see that as taking over control of their own logistics destiny when they're relying on long supply chains. I think they'll be picking up on the point about long supply chains and alternative suppliers. I think businesses will think about whether they do onshore in the future, or maybe they bring offshore to the nearshore. So they might be using, rather than China, India, they might think, actually, let's use Eastern Europe because it's a little bit closer. We can get a bit more control over it. Or they might be considering, depending on the infrastructure in the UK, let's have our suppliers based in the UK, so we have even more control. Another factor is that suppliers, I think, need to be brought closer together, hug them a bit more, because they are experts in what they do. You move away from a transactional relationship where you're constantly beating them up because you want lower prices out of them, and you don't really look after them, but they keep coming back for more. They may not want to do that in the future. So why not hug them, get close to them, and let them help you overcome your supply chain problems. And then we talked about the rules of origin earlier on. I think those, it's a bit unclear at the moment, but I think those will have an impact on the way that supply chains work in the future. So those are my thoughts on the subject.
Thank you very much, Steve. One interesting point, Steve, you might note, you can now go by train to India and to China. The Silk Road is opening. Absolutely. The Belt Road project is developing. And that is a tremendous opportunity for companies in terms of development, as well as a different route for maybe more a cost-effective route for shipping. Yeah. Ken, would you like to make any comment on your experience on supply chains and how they're changing?
Indeed. Obviously, we've discussed a lot on this call the impact of COVID-19 and how it's affected trade in some ways, and also tariffs, right? So in the U.S., we had a geopolitical climate over the last 4 years that was very adverse. That was adversarial even with China, right, which is our largest trading partner. And as a result of this geopolitical climate, tariffs were exchanged back and forth punitively, in my estimation, and that created a lot of real pain for American SMEs on the import side, right? So we had some agitation and some stress over trade relationship with China, and then COVID-19 happened. And then what happened is U.S. manufacturers realized that they had this elongated supply chain because COVID was an event first in Asia, and that had a profound impact on the supply chain for U.S. SMEs. And it was acutely, it was an acute problem in anything related to medical or PPE. So the effect of that, in fact, has been a reexamination of the U.S. Supply chain and shortening that supply chain. And one of the easiest way to shorten it, short of buying airplane tickets for every part, is to find a closer geographic trading partner. So what that means is the U.S. SMEs are more open, I think, to trading with the UK or folks on the continent. And I would just make this final broad point. in the United States, in my estimation, we don't really care where the country of origin is. It could come from Mars, frankly, if it meets our value proposition. We are pretty agnostic about that. China got a little confusing with the geopolitical situation, but by and large, if it meets the value proposition, it meets the value proposition. So I think it opens up significant opportunities in certain sectors for UK and European-based or Europe-based SMEs, suppliers.
Thank you, Ken.
Roger,
sorry.
I just wanted to add on to what Ken just said very quickly. I think that there's a huge, and Steve mentioned it as well, you know, there's a set of crises that we should be leveraging. You know, don't run away from them, but hop onto them. You know, using all this entrepreneurial spirit, especially 30 years and younger. I'm working with some of these entrepreneurs. I mean, they're developing things such as solutions to some of the COVID things, like improving, developing businesses that protect services from COVID, cleaner air based on COVID, you know, the needs for cleaner air in buildings and in the built environment. All the logistics stuff. I think there's a huge opportunity, again, to sort of leverage. It's just what Ken was saying. You know, if we can get our values together in terms of how we do business, I think there's huge opportunities. COVID, climate change, social inclusion, community identity, all of these things are out there. And I since I work with cities, I see it every day. So that's my pitch.
Thank you, Sandra. Stephen, any comment from your point of view on the supply chains with respect to South Africa?
You're on mute, Steve.
I think you're on mute, Stephen.
I'm back, okay. I've got a small forum I work with here on an SME forum. We meet sort of once a month on an informal basis. And one of the discussions that came up recently was the whole thing of IT adoption in the supply chain integration. How can we use IT better in supply chain integration, you know, for SMEs wanting to work in these new markets? It's actually more of a question to the group, to be honest with you, from my point of view, because we never really got to an answer. But I was wondering if there's any other thoughts from Steve or others who might have some comments on that. Thank you.
Steve, have you got any comment on that?
I think IT integration within the supply chain will become increasingly important in 2021. There's a lot with the increased, everyone's been buying stuff online. So with e-commerce platforms now being a lot bigger than they were before COVID, I think the supply chains that underpin the online trading will become a lot more integrated. The IT will, and I haven't got any examples of where it's being done, but I'm pretty sure, because it's low margin business, that cost base needs to be managed, and that IT will be a driver to reduce that cost base.
I think that's very true. You can actually see that in the way some of the activities are operating in China. The IT interfaces from business to customer and B2C is now such that they've taken out a lot of costs in terms of the way they operate.
May I just say quickly, comment Steve's remarks. So regarding hugging suppliers and using IT, I think that's the way forward too. So in order to enable our UK clients to see what's going on the continent, they have access to cloud-based software that tells them 24/7 in real time what the stock is, what their stock movements are, what their currency movements are, so they can monitor and manage all whenever they want what's happening in Europe. If their stocks need replenishing, say they need a month to replenish a certain product range or a certain product, and we know exactly it takes X amount to prepare for that. They get a notification 6 weeks prior to what we expect, when we expect the stock to run out, with our run rates and increase in sales and so on and so on. that they should replenish a certain product. And this is very, very important. And this is only possible due to digital technology. It wasn't possible before. So I think a lot more businesses will go the way and outsource supply chain services. And makes sense because you save personnel. It's just clever.
So just on that, one of the things we sort of picked up in our discussion was obviously becoming more lean, more agile, and more sustainable. I think coming back to the climate change, it could have an impact there as well in that area too. So I think that is the way ahead, certainly from our side here. Yeah. Thank you.
Sam, have you got any sort of comments on your members and their attitude to supply chain changes?
Well, obviously, a lot of SMEs are in the supply chain, and yeah, things are changing all the time. Things are changing generally. I'd be fascinated to have this discussion again in 6 months' time because everything is changing. And I think for those of us that are in Britain on this call, if you ever think we're never going to get back to how it was before, I would just urge you to remind you what August looked like. We had a period where COVID was virtually dying out, or so we felt, and we had this scheme called Eat Out scheme, which encouraged us to get to use restaurants again, which started the restaurant trade, hospitality, and things started to look a lot brighter. So that to me was the picture of where we could be. And I think that we are in probably the dip, the ultimate dip. And I mean that in terms of both COVID and probably international trade, because of the perception of Brexit, the perception of a lot of businesses aren't trading at the moment because of Brexit. I think in 6 months' time, things might look very different. But coming back to Stephen's point, I've got a feeling that IT will be one of the big winners in all this. Because look at this, what we're doing now. If COVID had have happened 10 years ago, I think business would have grind to a halt. We couldn't have had these sort of conversations. We'd have just been one of us on a phone, and then will you ring Roger, and then Roger, after that, will you contact Steve? You know, it was, you know, you think now we can have these sort of conversations and we can all do business sitting at home. So I think IT has been a big success throughout COVID, and I think it's going to get more and more important in international trade. And if with all the other costs we're talking about that increasing, anything like IT that can reduce costs is going to be very appreciated.
Thank you. Right, we're nearly out of time. Anyone want to raise anything else before we close?
Just wanted to add to Sam's point. I mean, our cyber businesses in Gloucestershire are doing extremely well, remarkably well with all those IT activities. I know it's not exactly international trade, but I think one big impact that we probably didn't cover in today's panel session is about that work from home trend, about that deurbanization. We're still waiting to see whether that will be a long-term trend. It's having a huge impact on big cities like London, less so in places like Gloucestershire or Bristol, from what I'm aware of. Impact, but not as big. But what role that would play for those who are service-based companies, it's actually it's a huge amount of opportunities. You don't need to be based in cities anymore to benefit from a lot of that. Whether that would be the long trend for business development, whether that would still work post-pandemic, we don't know. But that's something to sort of to keep an eye on.
Thank you very much. That's a very interesting point. Gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much, first of all, for your participation. I think it's been quite an interesting and lively discussion. I think we've got a few things that we'll bring back to the table. We have a question and answer session this afternoon with a few of us, and we'll see what questions we get in from people A, attending this as observers, and B, the new questions we're getting in. So first of all, thank you very much for your participation. Thank you for your input, and I hope you found it challenging.